Hi, Amy. How's it going today?
Hi, Owen. Oh, it is good. Although it's not day for me, but it's day for you. So,
Yeah. What time is it there?
it is 9 p.m. 9 p.m. Yes, it's now dark. It's now dark. It was a lovely day in Melbourne today, Melbourne, Australia, but otherwise, it
Oh,
is the evening. So, yeah.
appreciate you joining at such a late hour. It's good you're having good weather as well. Fortunately, in the UK, we're cold, but we are sunny. You can see the sun beaming in through the window. So we're joining you on that theme.
Delightful. I'm a bit concerned. I'm obviously coming over in a couple of weeks for DAS, for the digital accounting show. And I'm like, I don't know what to pack. Is it going to be cold? Is it going to be hot? Well, I don't think it's going to be hot, but I'm like, is it going to be pissing with rain? Who knows?
I think you've got experience of being in the UK before, Amy. I would prepare for all weather conditions in the UK. That's pretty much the best advice I can give you. Not probably not very good advice, but that's about the extent of it.
Yeah, yeah, no, fair, fair.
Quick disclaimer, I have three quite large dogs in the house. I'm working from home today, and if we get a delivery, it might absolutely kick off in the other room. So I apologize if there's any background noise.
Nah, all good. All good, Owen.
Cool. So I can see people starting to drip feed in. So I'm just going to kick off and introduce myself and get Amy introduced as well. So a quick introduction. My name's Owen Burley. You might have come across me before. I'm one of the co-founders here at Coach Bar and with AppVentry. We've got Amy joining us on the call as well today from Clarity Street. And a big thank you again, Amy. Given that you're joining from Australia, I know it's pretty late in the evening there, so really appreciate you taking the time to join us for a chat.
My pleasure. I'm looking forward to today's session. It's going to be good.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I think there's an interesting topic that we'll get into in a moment as well around the differences between app advisory and tech advisory. I think there could be some differences of opinion, both between
Mm.
me and you, but also with the audience that are watching. So that could be a really interesting conversation slash debate. Looking forward to getting to that. Before we get into the session today, thank you everyone for joining. Just wanted to run through a few housekeeping pieces just before we get into the fun stuff. So, uh, in terms of audio and video, I think it should be set to have you muted automatically anyway, but just please ensure your microphone is muted to help us minimize that background noise. If you do have any questions throughout the call or throughout the session, type them into the Q&A box or the chat window. We'll get through them. We want to be really engaging within the call and listen to your thoughts on some of the things we're discussing. I think it'll be really valuable. And of course, use the chat for any comments or quick thoughts. Yeah, try to stay on topic of the conversation to keep it all flowing smoothly. For those of you who maybe have another session to get onto midway through or can't make the keep here or stay here through the entire session, we are recording today as well, and we'll make sure that we send you a follow up once we're wrapped up. Cool. That's the fun stuff out of the way. Let's get into the agenda for the day. And just before I get into that, maybe I think Amy, you maybe deserve a more thorough introduction, given your position within the ecosystem. So, I mean, over 15 years of experience, well over 15 years of experience in the accounting and technology Xero ecosystems. So, I'm really excited to hear your thoughts and some of the stories that you've seen over the course of your career today.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Um, yeah, look, Clarity Street has been running for about the last 9 years. And I started Clarity Street because back in the Australia market, we are very blessed to have a very good open ecosystem of apps. Coming from that side of town, that side of the country, obviously, Xero has been a very big influence in accounting tech. So, look, I started Clarity Street because there were heaps of apps out there at the time, and all of them were really good at going, pick me, I'll solve this problem for your firm. But they were all a bit crap at saying, oh, look, if you also use this app and this app and this app, this is what we do, but this is how we work together holistically. And accountants were really struggling and still are struggling to understand how, for their own practices, how all the apps and the tech actually obviously works together. And along the way, we've obviously helped not just accounting practices, but we've helped small businesses too. We've seen accountants try and help small businesses with implementing apps and implementing tech and those kinds of things. I've seen a raft of what to do, probably what not to do a lot of as well. So I am a bit keen to talk about this one because I probably have some, I might say some polarizing opinions, which forgive me in advance, everyone. But just about this topic. But I guess Clarity Street now, we help accounting practices to implement tech. So we help them actually implement it for themselves, their operational best practice, what you're using, how you're using it. Are you getting the most out of the connections that are available to you? Are you getting the most out of the actual apps that are available to you as well, using all the features and functionality? Is it being used in the most holistic way? Is it talking to each other? Are people and processes obviously feeding off that as well? And everything kind of humming within your practice. So we've got lots of different options around different consulting gigs. We've built a bit of tech from a technology side of thing when it comes to learning and education. So self-paced learning coursework, how to use the apps in the ecosystem, loads of knowledge-based articles and things like that. And then we have a coaching program that we've just launched as well for the admin and operation team members within an accounting practice. So how can we empower them to support the accounting team and the owners in a much more viable way, financially beneficial way as well. So yeah, we've just started that too. So that's Clarity Street in a nutshell.
Funny. It sounds like you are definitely the right person for this call anyway. So yeah, no, I really appreciate that introduction. Awesome. So let's get into the agenda for today. But there's a couple of things that we are going to be running through. First, we've done the webinar housekeeping. The second, let's define app advisory and tech advisory. So understanding the landscape of what are those two things. And I've seen many posts on LinkedIn, and I've had many conversations with the various events that we're fortunate enough to have in the UK. To your point, that there are a lot of polarized opinions out there. There's a lot of different opinions, and people are quite passionate about the way in which they define this. So really looking forward to sort of unpacking that and understanding understanding the differences, should there be any. Then we'll move on to identifying the right focus. I think some of those key challenges that firms face when they're deciding whether or not to concentrate on tech advisory, and maybe some real world examples of those that should do it, shouldn't do it, have done it, failed, won, and all of the above on that. And then we'll get into some best practice and strategies. So something that maybe we can help everyone on the call, everyone listening to the recording, maybe practically take away and put into their firm, explore maybe some baby steps for how you get started within this type of ecosystem, things that you can learn from of those that have succeeded and failed in the past. And Amy has maybe got some really good examples of that as well. So I think the goal really is just to equip everyone with a really informed basis on whether or not to focus on advisory services. And if you do go down the route of wanting to focus on that, maybe some things that can help you miss some of those potholes in the road. Oh.
Welcome to Voice Up.
Sounds like fun.
Let's get started with the first piece here. So defining app advisory and tech advisory. So in your opinion, Amy, like what's the difference? What is app advisory? What is tech advisory?
So this is probably the first little polarizing thing. I'm like, to be honest with you, I'm not entirely 100% sure between the difference, because I think it's just a point of a language difference. Apps, tech. I mean, if I had to really get specific about it, I would have said that tech advisory is, your technology component. I would normally say that that's a bit more hardware related. That's what I would typically relate it to, right? Apps are any of the apps that we obviously use on a day-to-day basis. But realistically, if you look at tech, it's not also hardware, because that's not necessarily true and correct. And it seems a bit of a random topic to obviously be unpacking. It's like, let's go and advise our clients on which laptops and which, monitors to use. Clearly, that's not what the point of this is. But, I think that look, from my perspective, you actually summed up pretty well the other day when we were talking about it, Owen, but I think apps is probably more around, well, this is an app and this is what the app can do. Tech advisor is probably a little bit more in depth. That's from my perspective. But equally, I think we're splitting hairs on the terminology of the words more than anything, because I could almost say that you could, barrel them into the same thing.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, I've heard similar things, similar perspectives as well, with others that I've spoken with. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. I think maybe what I've seen is that there's people want to categorize advisory, right? So there needs to be a scale, and obviously there is a scale. We're all aware of the scale that at the beginning you might have firms that don't do any form of advisory. They maybe just stick to the accounting solutions and then don't touch any form of advisory or implementation. Then on the other end of the scale, you've maybe got firms that do quite a lot of that. They get really involved in the discovery and the scoping process, in implementation, advising around a wide breadth of different apps and technologies within said ecosystems, and even beyond sort of the Zero and Intuit and FreshBooks and all of the other accounting solutions, even beyond all of those core app ecosystems within their app store, even beyond that into sort of operational technologies. So I think people are like, the way that I see this is that there's a desperation to sort of give everyone a grading. Where do you fall on this scale? And I think maybe that's where app advisory comes at the beginning half, where you kind of maybe dipping your toe in, and then tech advisory is maybe a more progressed version of that, where it's maybe a bit more sophisticated. But yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one. I mean, have you seen any other methods of grading advisory services so that you can understand, or maybe in fact a firm can understand how to grade themselves?
Well, even more amusing here is the term advisory, because I think, you could almost blame Xero 15 plus years ago when they first came onto the market. And I kind of think that I'm wondering if they were the ones that coined the term trusted advisor. And change that mentality from an accounting perspective, because they were the ones that basically came along and revolutionized the cloud accounting world, or started that revolution, sorry, forgive me. And they moved it into a world of, well, all of a sudden accountants, you're going to be doing your work much faster because we're cloud and we've got APIs and all the rest of that kind of stuff, which means that you can go off and do advisory. And the accountants went, okay, great, what's advisory? And because if you also want to break it down, to be fair, accountants have been advising on, compliance and tax regulations and rules and regulations for that since the dawn of time. So technically you have been doing advisory for quite some time. So I guess it's just it's just how do you want to slice and dice this? I think you are correct though. People do like to actually pigeonhole what type of advisory it actually is. So yeah, look, app advisory, tech advisory, I think the hard thing about that is actually understanding, well, what are you actually advising on to begin with?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that, like, first of all, what is the advisory piece that you're wanting to actually give advice on? Is it beyond the scope of what you're actually providing? And, this is probably going to be one of my most hated comments, but I don't actually necessarily think that the majority of accountants out there have any business doing advisory, whether it's beyond compliance advisory or tech or app advisory, because most of them can't get their basic compliance requirements for their clients actually completed. So how are you in a business to offer additional services if you can't even get your basic bread and butter done? And I know that that's probably really direct, but I spent a lot of time with accountants in Australia, having these conversations with them and saying, I want to do this and I want to do this kind of advisory. And I'm like, why do you think that you should? Like, you can't get your basics done.
So I mean, that's an interesting point. I mean, for those that are doing advisory and they are doing it well, and I have seen accounting firms in the UK and more broad, overseas, doing a really great job of the core accounting requirements that they have as part of their role, as well as some of the advisory role, and even if it's just around a small grouping of products or a large grouping of products, I've seen it done well, and I've seen it done badly. What's from your perspective, what is the magic sprinkling that they have in the ones that succeed on this? Like, what are they doing right in order to be able to deliver advice around apps and technology on top of the other services?
In my opinion, they have really ascertained exactly what their service offering is. That's the first thing. What are we actually doing? They've also typically niched. So their current client database is already typically niche to a couple of verticals That's usually what it is, which means that their team have a lot of exposure to, specific types. So it might be hospitality, it might be, different industries basically. So their team have already got access to their clients using a lot of the similar technology that's available in those verticals basically, right? So therefore, because their team are using things, they have also usually worked out, they've got their capacity planned out quite well. And then the ones that are doing it really well have typically had a couple of accountants that have come through that are usually younger, usually quite tech savvy, usually love doing this side of the business rather than the stereotypical accounting side. And the business owners have actually gone, you know what, let's invest the time. Let's actually let them spread their wings a little bit, and let's develop a service offering. Let them, double down on their knowledge when it comes to the technology side of things, and actually support them rather than splitting their role. Because I think the ones that do it poorly are the ones that have an expectation that, well, you were hired as an accountant, so you still need to have, a certain amount of billable hours, and you still need to reach this level of productivity. But on the side, you can go and do, the app side of things. I think that's the challenging part for some accounting practices. So the ones that do it well actually have really thought about it and developed an additional service, hiring and having the right team members in place. So they've effectively created an additional department, which takes care of this component of the business. So yeah, they're the ones that I've actually seen do really well.
I want to flip this on its head then.
Yeah.
What are the reasons why people have not done it well, right? I mean, why have you seen people fail at delivering on technology advice to their clients, be that, general ad hoc advice or maybe more, sophisticated implementation? Have you seen any examples of people not doing a great job of that, and maybe with some insight as to why?
So many. I think the number one reason from my perspective when accountants fail at doing this is when they advise and or implement an app for the client because it makes their life easier, as opposed to, is it the right product for the client? So I'm going to, I'm an Intuit accountant, right? So I use Intuit day in, day out, or I use Xero, whichever one it is. Therefore, if all of my clients are using Xero, then that makes my life easier. But what if Xero isn't the right fit for your client? That's kind of a big deal, basically. So if you implement Xero for them when actually MyOb is better, or QuickBooks is better, or FreshBooks, or whatever it is, then that's actually that's a large fail. So that'd be the first thing that I've seen done incredibly poorly. The other ones that I also see are, just because you have a knowledge of the app and the understanding of how the app works doesn't mean you have the ability to transfer that knowledge across to operational best practice for the client. Most accounting businesses who fail at it come at it from the lens of, well, how does it work from an accounting perspective? How does this app or this software, when we're implementing it, how will it work from the finance and accounting perspective? It's so much more than that. It's operational, right? So you actually have to take a really long, deep dive into everyone who's going to touch that piece of operational software, basically, right? So from start to finish, from the point of when a sale comes through to all the way along the line to delivery. Doesn't matter what business you're in, everyone has that, that sort of function. Even accountants have that function effectively, right? So what is the client life cycle? What is the apps that we're actually using? What connects, what doesn't connect? Those kinds of things. Accountants seem to fail because I can't put that lens on things, or they haven't thought about putting that lens on. They've only tried to see it from the financial aspects, which usually in a lot of businesses, that's a teeny tiny portion, because that's usually the output that they want. But on the day-to-day, when the actual business is using their operational software to run the business, the finance component is, as I say, it's usually kind of tiny in the grand scheme of things. So they're probably two major ones. Probably the third one that I find is that they just underestimate how much time these things take. That's probably, and therefore they undercharge, and therefore they underdeliver, and that's a hard one as well. So I guess a rule of thumb that I tend to tell people is, however long you think it's going to take, double that, and then double that again. And that's probably closer to what the ballpark is. But even then, that's just a guide stick.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what you've said there. And I kind of relate back to my career. And I have quite a long background of working in ERP and inventory management products, and in probably more of a consulting sort of sales capacity. And when I think about it, I can't maybe in some of these accounting firms that are failing, they make great salespeople. They understand the pitch, they understand the proposition. But I tell you what, if you had got me in any of those roles to join the implementation team and actually be accountable for making that product work, tick, and fit into the customer's ecosystem, I wouldn't have the first clue how to do it. Selling it is actually not the most difficult thing, because you're talking about the high value sort of high level sort of value proposition and a general gist of how the product works. Actually
Yeah.
making that a reality within varying ecosystems of technology is certainly it's not as simple. Let's put it that way. So yeah, I understand where you're coming from with that.
I think as well, like I think accountants and for sometimes don't set expectations correctly either. And that's probably one of the most infuriating thing when it comes to an implementation. So from like you were just talking about the sales process, and yeah, it is actually easy to sell, the benefits of the app to the client. I spend a lot of my time in sales calls actually talking about the faults of the app and or setting expectations around what it won't do,
Yeah,
because that usually is one of the things that it actually builds a lot more trust, because you're like, okay, cool. So you're not just trying to sell me on all the perks and the benefits. Okay, great. So you're telling me what it won't do. Because high level, right? If they're inquiring and asking about an app and they want to know about it, most clients are going to go, all right, cool. I already know that it's going to solve most of my problems. What I actually really want to know is, where are the pitfalls going to be? So setting the expectations for the client around what it will and won't do will also save you so much time in the long run. It's when you don't set clear expectations for them that they tend to get a little bit pissy at you, because something hasn't happened in the right way. And that's when it leaves a sour taste in everybody's mouth as well, when they have an expectation of what they think it's going to do versus the reality of what it will actually do.
yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really clear definition of success and failure when it comes to delivering on advisory services. Now, at this point in the webinar, I'm actually really interested, for the people who are currently live and joining us, I want to put out a poll. I'm really interested in learning from you guys whether or not you deliver advisory, be it app advisory or tech advisory. And I think the way that we're maybe defining it, at least for the purpose of this call, is that app advisory is maybe giving the customer a bit of guidance, maybe acting as that salesperson around what apps should or shouldn't be used, maybe a bit of a general knowledge around one of the many hundreds of apps that are in the ecosystems currently. I'm interested in just understanding whether or not you offer that advisory, whether you do that occasionally, or whether you have a structured process, or whether you don't do it at all. So let me launch this poll. It should be coming through to you in a moment. So as you can see, how would you describe your firm's current approach to app and tech advisory services? We offer app advisory, but it's mostly free or low fee and not structured service. We occasionally help our clients with apps, but it's not a core focus. We have a structured revenue generating tech advisory service in place. So I'm starting to see some of those results come through.
I'm interested to see the answer to this one as well, actually. I find it quite curious, because I think one of the other things, whilst we're just leaving that there for a moment, that I was just thinking about is, from a Clarity Street perspective, when we first started out, we actually started by basically doing app advisory and implementations for pretty much anyone who required our services. And what I quickly learned after doing, some decent enough, but, in hindsight, probably not the best that I could have done at the time, is that we ended up becoming a jack of all trades and a master of none, so to speak. And that was the other thing that I've also worked out from, with accountants who like to do app advisory, is because most public practice accountants have a very broad spectrum of clients and industries that their clients are in. So it becomes quite challenging to possibly offer that service, because you have to be across a lot of apps. Like our specialty now is accounting practices. And even in that realm, there are dozens of apps purely just for the accounting industry to run their businesses. So that's also something to consider. Like I mentioned it before around niching, and that's something that, if you like, the ones who do it well are the ones that kind of go, all right, we'll only deal with clients in this one or two couple of verticals. So yeah.
I love that. Yeah, and I think one of my final questions to cover off this initial topic was how would you describe, sharing a real world example of how you've seen an accounting firm actually make a significant difference in delivering value to a client. So I think maybe hop back to that initial discussion we had around what they did right. Have you got an example of where you've seen an accounting firm get it right and just really deliver value to the client?
Um, yes, there are multitudes of them. I think the ones that I've actually really seen, this particular firm, it's an Australian firm, just as a side note, and they actually have a dedicated team who does I would suggest that they do tech advisory because they do full blown, tech implementations for their clients. And they were telling me about a client that they helped out. It's a rural client. And it was just something that had completely and utterly revolutionized this particular client's way of working. They were an old school client. They were, shoebox kind of scenario, used to come in and get their work done once a year, that kind of thing. And it was just painful for the team to actually do their work. So they actually implemented a couple of bits of tech for them. It wasn't just the accounting side. It was, as I say, it was some farming software as well that actually implemented. And it just completely changed the way that this client actually saw how they were doing the work. Like, it wasn't painful for them anymore. Like, it was easy for them. And because they were effectively rural, it meant that they didn't have to come in nearly as frequently or spend days, if not weeks, prior in preparation, when they would only come in a couple of times a year to see the accountant, to actually preparing, because everything was just sort of live and ready to go. So it just completely improved the relationship between the client and the accountant, basically. So there are some amazing success stories out there when this is done right. But equally, I've seen it not be so great too at times. So pear-shaped, definitely.
Awesome. Well, we've got some of the results coming in from the poll, so this is really interesting. We've got 0% of you offer app advisory, but it's mostly free or low fee or not in a structured service. That's maybe good news.
Good.
We've got 57% of the audience that say we occasionally help clients with apps, but it's not a core focus. So the majority of you, almost 2/3 of you, saying that it's not a core focus, but you will help occasionally ad hoc. And the remainder, 43%, we have a structured revenue generating tech advisory service in place. I think those percentages are indicative of like the industry as a whole, or maybe is that just specific to our audience?
Nah, that's specific. That's got to be specific to the audience. Sorry. Which, to be fair, our topic that we're talking about today is a relatively niche topic, right? So the people who are on this call, I think, are genuinely kind of curious and probably want, and probably have already sort of either thinking about it, already kind of doing it, and or are somewhat nailing it and just want some additional tips and tricks around how to possibly do it better, which is a really good thing. So I think it's definitely more for this audience rather than for, as a generalization, because I can tell you, I would say that most in the market that I deal with sit in option 1 and 2. Maybe a very small percentage sit in the third option. So for those that are actually nailing it, congratulations. I think it's great.
Yeah, I must admit, yeah, I thought when I saw those results come in, that's maybe not the industry as a whole. So yeah, that's good. Well done to everyone on the call, because it seems like you have your ducks in a row. You know which category you sit within, and yeah, maybe we can help some of you move from, or give you some guidance as to whether or not it's a good idea to move from the app advisory to the tech advisory piece in the way that we've categorized it. So let's move on to topic number 2 here. Circling back to topic number 2, identifying the right focus. So I wanted to discuss some of the challenges that firms maybe face when they're deciding, whether or not to concentrate on app advisory or expand into tech advisory, and maybe some examples from you on that as well, Amy. So I'll start off maybe with this question: why is app advisory falling short as a sustainable business model, and what's missing? And when I reference that question, I mean, why do most firms struggle to monetize app advisory? And maybe what are some of the biggest challenges with that?
I think that they struggle to monetize it because I think that there is a lack of an understanding of what's actually involved in the implementation. I mean, there are, interestingly enough, a lot of accountants who also struggle to put a value on the services that they provide and still sit under the realm of let's just charge by the hour. But ultimately, even your hourly rate is an arbitrary figure that was made up because somebody said, oh yeah, that sounds about right. Somebody will pay me that much money. So then it's, multiplied by the hours that you work. And it's sort of somewhat no different in a way to, how you would value the service from an app perspective, but it doesn't have to be that way. There is a bit of well, how long is a piece of string? How much are we going to charge for this? But I think a lot of firms actually really struggle with that because there is a very big difference between this is how much it costs us to implement and how much time it's taken us to implement versus what is the value to the client and what could the client foreseeably I guess, feel is the right figure for them to pay for this service. So I think a lot of accountants undercharge, dramatically undercharge based on that, because there is a lot of scope there that, businesses see the value proposition in completely different ways than a lot of accountants do. And I think that's something to remember as well from this perspective. So charging for the services, it is, look, ultimately understanding what others are charging can also help you with a bit of a ballpark figure. There is a bit of a suck it and see when you're first starting out, but equally it's no different to the way you did when you started with your accounting services. How much should I charge for this service? I feel like it's this much. Oh, great, they paid for it. Let's now incrementally up it. I know that it's not an exact science, but there is, as I mentioned before, there is also how long does it actually take and what's going to be involved. The only way that you can truly understand that is if you do an actual proper discovery, though, with the client. If you just say, this is the app and this will be right for you, and I think that we should just implement it and this is how much it's going to charge, that this is how much we're going to charge, without truly understanding the client and their needs, their operational needs, that's where you're going to fall short. So something that I always recommend to clients, again, similar to the way that you would actually bring on a new client sometimes. So even if you are a fixed price firm, right? So you fixed price or fixed fee all of your work for your clients, brand new clients, it's a bit hit and miss. So I actually recommend for a lot of accounting practices, well, why don't you do for year one, actually do charge by the hour for those brand new clients. And then after year one, once you've got a really good understanding of what you're doing for them, then you can put them onto a fixed price. And it's no different to this scenario here, right? So let's do a discovery. We'll charge a flat rate for the discovery, which is maybe it's half a day, couple of days, depending on the scale of the app, just depending on the scale of the business, what you're trying to do. Charge a flat fee for that. And then off the back of that, create the proposal, because then you have a really good understanding of what's actually going to be involved. You do also have to really understand the technology that you're going to be implementing. If you've made a recommendation to a client and you've never actually touched that app or used that app, you kind of have to factor in some time that you're going to spend learning the app along the way. So that's also part of this process as well. I don't necessarily advise that. Or if you're going to do that, you may need to take a bit of a hit because, you're still kind of learning the app too. But yeah, I don't know, does that answer your question, Owen?
I think so. Yeah, I like that last expression. It feels a little bit like maybe they'll be flying the plane whilst also building the plane to a certain degree, which there's an element of risk with that. So
Yeah.
yeah, starting off slow and feeling your way into a product, making sure you have a really good understanding of what it does, how it does it, how it's implemented, what its limitations are, and that you're transparent with that around the customer means that you're delivering value. And if you're delivering value, then ultimately, customers will be quite happy to pay for it, irrespective of the cost, as long as it's in line with sort of industry standards. And yeah, I think that's a great summary.
I think I think the other thing to understand is like your team actually have to have an appetite for this as well. You've got to have people internally that actually have an appetite and a desire to want to implement this tech for and on behalf of your clients. There's no point in offering these services if there's only one person really doing it and you're the principal of the business. It's not going to bode well, right? So you actually have to have a team of, tech savvy, hungry accountants or not accountants, if you've actually set it up as, a well-structured revenue generating service that you've got in place. Like you should have actually hired people that actually had that knowledge. And the only reason why, the only way that you're obviously going to start out with doing this is because, as I mentioned before, you've probably already come across a lot of this tech before throughout using it or looking at it because you've got clients that are already using some of these apps. That's when you can start developing a knowledge for it and therefore start rolling it out to other clients if that's what you're actually trying to achieve. You need the knowledge first, I guess, or at least, or you need to be really transparent with a client and let them know that you are building the plane as you fly it, and we're all learning together, whichever.
Foundational customer, I think, is maybe the term. But yes, well, this is
I love
interesting.
that.
So
I love that. Foundational customer. That's great. Make them feel super special.
But I'm really interested, right? So we've got these two categories, app advisory and tech advisory.
Mm,
Would you say that both of them can be revenue generating advisory options?
definitely.
Okay.
100%.
And with app advisory, would you embed that within your existing accounting services, or would you have that as part of a dedicated team? And maybe the same question for tech advisory in the way that we've defined it. Would that be integrated as part of your existing processes and services, or would that be a separate service as a bolt-on?
I think app advisory can be part of it can be part of the same team that's delivering. Because realistically, all you're doing is providing advice on which apps the client could potentially use, right? So
Yeah.
you're not really, it's risk adverse. Like, sorry, you're not really taking that much of a risk. Like, you're making recommendations of the apps. And therefore, the current team can probably do that, again, if they've got that knowledge and that, they're a bit tech savvy and that kind of thing. I think it's still a separate service, but it can be part of your overall, this is what we're actually doing. If it's tech advisory, I personally think that you should be having dedicated team members for that, and or team members within the current structure, and they have a dedicated portion of their role and or time that they can actually spend on doing the implementations and things like that for their clients. I think there has to be some really clear delineations for those accountants that are still expected to do, call it revenue generating work, compliance work, those kinds of things. I think there has to be a really clear delineation that, this is what their expectation is for this portion of their role, i.e. traditional accounting, versus the non-traditional advisory, tech advisory side of things. That's if you have them doing both roles. If you've got dedicated team members and they're solely doing that, well, then that's different. That's what their role is. So yeah, I think look, as an example, we actually have a service which is on our website, it's called an app stack strategy session. If this is an idea that anybody wants to take on board, feel free. You can rip it if you like, rinse, rip off and duplicate, as they might say, R&D. It's called an app stack strategy session. It's 90 minutes for accountants, 60 minutes for bookkeepers. And it is literally that time. Come to me with all of your questions. I will give you the advice based on your structure, your processes, your procedures. I'll let you know what apps are available to you, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what you could look at, what you don't want to look at. This won't work with this because you're already using this, or you're already doing that, so don't bother with that, those kinds of things. I record the session. I then send them the recording and go, if you would like to engage us further, you are welcome to do so. If not, you can go off and, hear all of the suggestions that I could possibly give to you, go and do your own research, go and do your own implementation, that kind of thing. So as a baseline, I've still made my knowledge. And the reason why I did it is because, with all due respect, I kind of got tired of rinsing and repeating, giving away free knowledge. And we still do, by the way. We don't charge for everything. We do a complimentary 45-minute session with anybody who wants to talk to us. Beyond that, though, it's okay, if you want more, we're probably going to start charging you. And that's how we came up with the app stack strategy session. So feel free, for all of those people that are sitting in the 57% realm of that we occasionally help clients with apps. If you just want to do app advisory, monetize it that way.
Love that. And that's just like a
Idea.
really easy entry point into delivering and actually, generating revenue from a service that you're probably already offering. And the great thing I think about those strategy sessions is that, you can be quite transparent about your limitations and the areas of expertise that you have. Certainly don't overstep the areas and be more than what you're able to be. And over time, you will progress and develop the skill sets in the areas that you see demand within your audience. But yeah, it's sort of a very low risk way of generating revenue, and you'll very quickly learn how to make that better, I guess.
And the other thing about it is, through doing those, it's a really good way to learn about what people's pain points are and what they're actually seeking, which means that throughout that, they'll be like, oh, have you heard of this app? And you're sitting there going, actually, no, I haven't. Mental note, go and research that app off the back of this call. Do you know what I mean? And that's when you start actually building up your knowledge as well. I think you are right, though, Owen. As part of that, you do have to feel and this is a challenging one for accountants, you do have to feel comfortable by saying, I don't actually know the answer to that, but I will come back and find that out for you, which sometimes is very hard for this industry. God bless you all. But it can be challenging from that perspective. But if you're comfortable with doing that, it is a really easy way to monetize the service that you're already providing anyway.
Love it. And obviously you've been doing this for a while, Amy. Like, have you seen an increase in like client demand for app advisory? Is it something that these firms need to actively sort of promote? Or is it something where the demand is already there within the client base? People are, there's hand raisers left, right, and center, and there's quite a big piece of the pie just ready for the taking.
I think accounting practices, I'm going to liken this to the latest buzzword in the industry, which is AI. Everybody's talking about AI and should I know AI and those kinds of things. I think it's no different to app advisory at the end of the day, right? As a practice, what you should have is either the knowledge in-house to be able to provide that service and advice to your clients, because clients will ask you. By nature of the simple fact that you are looking at their businesses, you are talking to them about their businesses, things will come up, questions will be asked. So you need to have one of two things, either the knowledge or the relationship with those that do. And therefore, you don't necessarily have to provide this, but what you should do is build, good fundamental relationships so that you can go, you know what, I don't know the answer, but I know someone that will. I'm going to put you in touch with them. And that's also you still being the trusted advisor, which is what you should be, because you're still providing them with an answer. You're not just saying no. So if this isn't something that you want to pursue, you don't have to. And it's just, as I say, it's the same as AI. You don't have to sit there and go, oh my God, I need to understand every little intricate detail of how AI works. No, but you do need to understand what it actually does, and potentially have some people in your business and or around you that have a really good understanding that could possibly support you in how it could be used within your business. I think it's the best way of saying it.
Yeah, love it. So we need to wrap up this second topic, because I know we've got one final one to get through in the last 15 minutes. Final question on this. If firms want to shift from that really ad hoc sort of app advisory approach to maybe a more structured revenue generating scalable approach, what's the first sort of operational change they need to make in order to take that step? Or mindset change for that matter?
Yeah, I'd actually be more, I think it's a little bit different. What is the service that you are offering? That's the first thing. Where are your boundaries? What are the apps that you're willing to take on board? As a starting point. You can always expand once you've kind of nailed your core apps, definitely. But, we're like, hypothetically, we're really good at these 5 apps for this vertical. Let's start there. Fabulous. What is the service? Are we starting with a discovery? Are we not? Are we just going straight into we're charging via the hour? We think it's going to be this long or not? I think it's those things first is the fundamentals. But the other part that goes hand in hand with this is also, do I have the capacity and the team to actually offer this service? If you're at the point where we're going app advisory to tech advisory and you want to transition into actually full-blown, you probably already do have that, but make sure you've got a bit of a contingency plan in place as well. Like, as I mentioned before, make sure that the team members that you're probably going to take away from doing actual compliance and accounting work that have just been currently giving advice, that they are happy to do it. They probably are. They're probably the ones that are pushing this. It's probably not you, the business owner. It's probably the accountant going, can I do this more? Can I do more of this? And therefore work out, are you happy to lose them as an accountant? Because that's a hard one sometimes, especially in this day and age. It's very hard to find good quality accountants. And what is what's your backup plan to replace them? They're probably the operational components. I'm just trying to think if there's any others. Yeah, team, what your service offering is, and then how you're going to deliver it. Then you can start going, well, how do I go to market with this sort of stuff as well? Because the challenge that you might also find is you might start doing a lot of app advisory and then start doing implementations, but implementations take up a hell of a lot more time than just giving advice. So understanding what the capacity is for those as well. How long should the project take? Those kinds of things. It's going to be the first couple that you do from advisory versus like full implementation. They're going to be kind of suck it and see. So you have to be comfortable with the fact that you're going to probably lose, which nobody really likes, but it's kind of the reality. And as long as you're learning from each one and improving, project after project, it's honestly, it's how I did Clarity Street. It was a lot of failure, a lot of wins and a lot of success, but a lot of tweaking and, okay, we just kind of got through that one. Great. How about we don't do it like that next time? And you know what? And just tweaking and getting better and better. So it's until it's a well-oiled machine.
Love it. And just to wrap up this topic and move on to the next one, if anyone's got, feel free to open up the chat.
Mm.
When you open up the chat, you can do it to everyone. We'd love to hear, we've unpacked quite a lot in this middle topic around what firms maybe struggle with in terms of monetizing app advisory, what are some of the biggest challenges, and then, what are those initial steps that people have taken into maybe making their app advisory more sophisticated. Would love to hear some stories from everyone on the call, especially with how you went from delivering it as a really ad hoc service to maybe taking that first step in attempting to make that a more structured, revenue generating line of business for your firm. So great to open up your chat, pop a note in there, and we'll maybe review those once we've got into topic 3. So,
I'm really
topic 3.
about that too.
Sorry, let me say that again.
I'm really curious about that too. I'd love to hear how people have transitioned because it's always interesting to see, what are your war stories? Let us know what your war stories are. Let us know your wins as well.
Absolutely. Awesome. So I think topic 3, we've maybe unpacked it somewhat already anyway, but best practices and strategies. So, exploring best practices for offering digital optimization or, tech advisory, whatever you might want to call it, into your service offerings. We've spoken about that a little bit already, Amy, but maybe one of the biggest hurdles that I've heard that maybe firms face when transitioning from app advisory to tech advisory, i.e., less sophisticated to more sophisticated services, is figuring out how to structure price for these services. And you mentioned it a little earlier on, the hourly fee versus sort of the one size fee as a charge. Like, how can firms move away from ad hoc low fee work and start positioning tech advisory as maybe a premium revenue generating service? And there's some assumptions loaded into that question, based on what we've discussed. They're capable of doing it, they have the right structure in place, and they've been through some of those processes that we spoke about earlier in the call. But yeah, how do firms move away from those ad hoc low fee positions to delivering it as a good revenue generating opportunity for the firm?
It's no, like at the end of the day, you have to think differently from an accounting perspective. And this is the challenging part with this particular service. What you're about to offer is something that clients don't necessarily need. Do you know what I mean? Or it's more of a want than a need to a certain degree. So from a compliance perspective, being an accountant and doing, tax and compliance and all of those kinds of components, ultimately it's a requirement. It's actually a requirement, especially as a business owner, you have to do your tax work, that kind of thing. So you've just gone from a service where you are used to not having to hustle for work because the government dictates that you will always have a steady stream of clients because they have to pay tax effectively, right? So you will always have work. When it comes to this, though, you have to hustle a little bit. You actually have to start listening to your clients and actually spotting opportunities and therefore coming up with a bit of a sales process as well. And the sales process should lead into naturally, therefore, well, how much are we going to actually charge for the client? Like how much are we going to charge for this service with this particular client? We typically try and understand a few factors about that client. What's their revenue that they're currently turning over? What industry they're in? How many team members? What does the training look like? Those kinds of things. Because there is, and that does come down to it as well. Do you need a third-party provider to support you in this? Are you just going to sort of play project lead as opposed to doing the actual implementation? Because there are components where you could play both in this instance. But understanding those can usually help you to charge appropriately. So one of the things that I quite like to understand is, does the actual app that we're wanting to implement for this client, do they have an implementation service themselves? Like, do they self-implement the app? There are some apps out there that do have an onboarding and implementation division. There are some that don't. the ones that do, ask them how much they're charging. And then usually it should be roughly around that ballpark figure, but also not necessarily, because you need to understand what the app provider is actually delivering as part of their service versus how can you now add additional value to the client. Most of the value that you're going to add to the client is not just the nuts and bolts of the configuration component of setting up that app. It's the hand holding, it's the post implementation, it's the training, it's the advice component, it's this is how you could use this in a best practice manner. That's what you're actually going to be charging, and that's the true value to your clients in terms of that delineation from app to tech advisory and implementations. So from how much to charge, it is, as I say, we've covered it off, do a discovery. That's the first part. I would, as I said, understand what others are charging for this particular service, but mainly from the app provider, and then work out, all right, well, what extra can I actually throw on top of this? Because the other thing is a lot of the implementations that apps provide these days, it might be a quick onboarding, but then it's self-help stuff. And clients are crap at self-help. No one's good at doing the self-help thing. Like, it's used, it should be there as an additional resource. But realistically, what they want is for somebody to sit with them and teach them how to use the product that's going to suit them. Whether that's online, whether that's on site, that's also something else to consider. Should you actually be going on site? Do you need to go on site? Because if you're going on site, then that's a lot more time that you're spending that you can't spend elsewhere with your clients. In this day and age, most of the apps that you're implementing are cloud-based. So you shouldn't have to go on site with a client for a large proportion. So it's something that we actually made a big change of at Clarity Street. Obviously, COVID kind of helped us with making that decision because we kind of couldn't for a couple of years. And I'm also Melbourne based, so I literally couldn't leave my house for quite a long time. So, we had to actually change our business model and everything moved to online. So our delivery is now all online. Our training sessions are online, the delivery that we do, but all the tech that we're implementing is cloud-based. So we can do a lot of it behind the scenes. But that also means that if we do things online, I can see, if I've got an hour training, for each client, basically, I can effectively see 8 clients in a day. I mean, I don't want to see 8 clients in a day. That's not where I'm going. But I could if I wanted to. Whereas if I'm on site at a client's, I can only see 1 client. That's it. So you've got to remember you need to charge accordingly for that too. Okay, so just how can you actually scale your time? How can you scale your services? That's another thing to consider as well.
Love it. And through my career, I've worked probably more on the operational software side, right? So I've worked with, as I mentioned before, inventory management, ERP, and some of those tools have very great networks of partners around them. So most recently, the likes of Sin7, they've got great partners like Bluehub that many will know on this call, and others like Caltech and the Clever Dudes and Fiscal Finance out in the US. There's loads of really great firms and individual software consultants that are affiliated with them as a tool. And we did some studies around the differences between those customers that do it themselves, try to sort of take on technology and implement it internally versus using someone who had done it before. And there were varying degrees of quality in the network of partners. Some were probably more affiliated with the app advisory category, and some were maybe more affiliated with the tech advisory category as software consultants affiliated with Sin7. But across the board, when they were working with a third-party advisor, whether they be a part of an accounting firm or whether they be an independent software consultant, the metrics it wasn't even close. I think there was, just over 50% that were seeing success and still there after a year that self-implemented versus well into the 90 percentile of those that had used a consultant. So how do you think firms should communicate the ROI of tech advisory to clients who might be used to getting sort of app-related support for free or have a lack of willingness to pay for it? Whilst we're doing that, I am going to our final poll as well. So as you answer that question, guys who are listening, please get involved on the poll.
I think I liken this to, I have this conversation with accountants on a daily basis, right? And, I don't know whether you can use this for some of your clients, but you should be able to try, to use the analogy. I say to my accountant, to the accountants, look, I'm actually personally not an accountant. However, I've worked in the industry for 15 plus years. I have worked in practice. I know enough knowledge. I could probably do my taxes. I've got a group structure. There's 5 entities, give or take. There's a couple of individuals, etc. I could probably do my own tax work. Do you think that I should do that? Do you think that that's in my best interest? Is that the best use of my time? And their usual answer is, oh, no. I'm like, correct. Same as, I know that you are incredibly intelligent. I know that you can do the app implementation or the tech implementation, but is this your bread and butter? And is this actually the best use of your time? Because whilst you're not generating revenue by taking yourself out of revenue generating activities to improve your business and do the operational side of things, you could be out there, generating that revenue and paying somebody else to actually do the service that knows what they're doing it in a quarter of the time, getting you trained up so that you can actually continue on with your day-to-day activities effectively. So 9 times out of 10, that usually works. Some of them, though, are still stubborn and they just want to do it themselves. And I'm like, go for it. Go for gold. It's actually quite surprising the number that do come back to us, though, in time.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You see them at events and you're like, how are you going? You're like, oh, yeah, we're still struggling. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. If you need it. Yeah. I'm like, that's okay. Sometimes people just like to actually sit in their own pain for a little bit longer, but then we do have a lot that come back to us and be like, yeah, okay, right. We tried, we need some help. No worries. Happy to help. So yeah, that's usually probably what I'd be saying to clients, but ultimately, there are a lot of clients out there that no matter what you do, they're never going to pay you for the knowledge or the advice. So my advice in that instance is stop providing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was always the case that, I mean, it's the same as with buying a software product, right? That the pain needs to be great enough in order for someone to seek a solution. So people aren't going to want to implement technology unless there's something that they want to fix. And similarly, people aren't going to want to utilize a paid service to have someone help them implement changes unless they've had pain in trying to do it themselves, because otherwise they'll take that that approach of, yeah, I'm fairly tech savvy, I can do this, but then they don't quite realize the difference between high level evaluation and full implementation of a product, and they are 2 very, very different things.
Agreed. And on that, just as a side note, one of the reasons why I had to get off from doing sales and I now have somebody who does it is, and accountants really struggle with this as well. I'm like, I know all the knowledge, I have all the knowledge, I'll just help you and I'll just give you all the answers. And I'll just tell you everything that you need to know on the call. And that kind of can backfire sometimes. So another piece of advice for accountants out there who are genuinely just want to help clients, try and hold back a little bit on that help when it comes to this particular service. Like, they don't need to pay for your knowledge. You've spent time learning it and understanding it. So, get your bang for buck basically out of it. Help to a degree, but don't give them all the answers is my point.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, thank you everyone for participating in that last poll, for the interesting results coming back. And I think, yeah, everyone at least kind of got some value from today's session. So we didn't get any no's, so that's always a
Okay, that's
good. We've something to help. So if you do have any last minute questions, we've got about a minute left on the call. Please feel free to post them in the chat. Amy, from your side, let's leave everyone with a parting couple of sentences, right? So we've spoken about and unpacked app advisory, tech advisory. What would your advice be to people who they want to start doing more, they want to start generating revenue? What tools are there out there that can help them? Who should they be connecting with and speaking with? What should their next action be following this session?
I think making sure that you've got the right tech in place for yourselves to manage this. It is a different service to what you're used to providing for your clients from, a compliance perspective, from a practice management perspective. So actually look at, some different tech. I also think that, making sure that you've got good relationships with other app and or tech implementers in the industry. Get friendly with the apps as well. See if you can become an implementation partner. See if, some of your team members can actually go and do some additional learning and coursework on their particular apps, if that's something that you want to implement for your clients. Also, maybe even, the next sort of 10 clients that you have or deal with, ask the clients, is there a need for this? Do you think that there's a service in this? Do you have any needs around this? Can we assist you with this? Like, that's a really good way to start, obviously, understanding, if you if you should transition from the app to the actual tech side of the implementations as well. So do a bit of market research with your current client base, just, casually, don't have to go hardcore on it. Seriously, some casual investigation. Look, I think it is a realm that you can go into. Just be mindful that if you are going to, make sure you've got the correct infrastructure in place and that you know what you're doing. I've seen a lot of failures from accountants who think that they know what they're doing as opposed to actually understanding the client and what their needs are. So make sure you're seeing it from the client lens, not from the accounting lens, which is the hard one.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. And I think we're about out of time, Amy. But I really appreciate you joining us on the call and sharing your insights today. Hopefully, everyone found it really, really helpful listening into the discussion. Looking forward to seeing you as well. So that's toward the end of this month. We'll catch up and have a drink. And if anyone who wants to with Amy after the call, Amy, how do they get in touch with you?
You are welcome to send me an email, amy@claritystreet.com.au. Oh, and there is actually a question that was posted in the Q&A, just saying, do Clarity Street advise accounting practices in UK or Ireland on developing their service? We don't technically, but never say never. I'm happy to have a conversation with you. So more than happy if anybody wants to shoot me an email. As I said, Amy, amy@claritystreet.com.au. Happy to have a conversation with anybody who's curious about this moving forward.
Amazing. Yeah, well spotted, Amy. Thank you for that. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining. And if you're going to the digital accounting show towards the end of this month, start of next month, we'll be there. Amy will be there. Come and find us, have a conversation. But otherwise, all of the details will be on our website, so you can get in touch if you've got any questions. And we'll speak soon. Thanks again, Amy.
Thanks so much, Owen. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.